In our first 317 lab exercise, we're going to introduce you to some of the tools in Illustrator and see if we can replicate an illustration like this that is from the title page to a magazine photo feature. So let's get started here. We're going to call up the Illustrator new file dialog. Your interface may look a little bit different than mine or have different color because I'm using a 1 year earlier version, but it's going to work pretty much the same. You launch Illustrator, something like this will come up, go to Create New. And then in this case, we're going to make a new document for print. And so we're going to click here on Print. Let's change our measurement to inches unless yours already has inches. And we'll go with 8.5 by 11, but let's change this to a horizontal orientation. So this is what we'll have. So 11 inches wide, 8.5 inches deep. Don't worry about the bleeds or anything like that. And then go ahead and say Create. And now your artboard will come up. And we'll close this character window for now. Okay, so let's get our workspace and our artboards and things organized. Your windows or panels that you work with will generally appear on the right. You can move them around, but anytime you want to open a new window or something, it's under this Window menu, and when you open something, it will usually appear here. If it's active, it's got a check mark next to it. If it's not active and not somewhere on your desktop, then it's blank. So that's kind of when you're looking for something and you think you've got it open or something like that, look here under the Window menu and it'll tell you whether or not it's open. You can also move these things around a little bit. So if you want to, you can put your layers down near the bottom or something like that. I'm going to get rid of the transparency. We're not going to need that. Let's work with layers here a little bit. So what I want to do, I want to import this picture of the cloud illustration that we're going to kind of use as our model. So I want to just kind of import that and then kind of put it to the side so that we've got that as a reference that we can look at. So in Illustrator, I'm going to go to File, Place, and this is the cloud illustration model, a JPEG. I click Place, and then it's going to show me a tiny little thumbnail of it, and the little corner there where the arrow is, that means that will be the upper left corner of the image of the file that I'm placing. So if I put it right here, that's where the upper left corner of it will be. So here's our image. It's bigger than we probably need right here, so I'm going to, with the selection tool, V selected, I'm going to reduce it. I could also do something like Object, Transform, Scale, and reduce it that way. But if I just use my selection tool, hold down the Shift key to constrain the proportions, I hold down the Shift key and then click there in the corner and drag, I can resize that pretty quickly. And now I'm just going to kind of move it off to the side of my artboard so that it's there and I can kind of take a look at it whenever I need to, but it's not really interfering with the rest of the work that we're doing. So just to keep things straight, you don't have to do this when you're only working with a few layers, but if you're working with a lot of layers, you might want to name your layers. So I'm going to call this the model. All right, now we're going to make a new layer, and I can come down here where it says Create New Layer. This is also where I can get rid of one. I can also click here on the options and say New Layer. And now for the layer number 2, I'll go ahead and name that one now, and that's going to be, we'll call that Corona del Mar, because that's where the picture was taken that we're going to import here. And click OK. Now with this layer active, I'm going to knock off this properties here, with the Corona del Mar layer active, here's the model layer active, here's the Corona del Mar layer active, I'm going to go to File and Place again. This time I want to bring in the Corona del Mar. And we'll go ahead and bring in the Photoshop version of that. It's a much bigger file, but if I ever need to go back and edit the photo in Photoshop, then then it will remember where the file is. And one thing you want to do when you're bringing in a file, you want to decide whether it's a linked file or an embedded file. By default, Illustrator is going to do a linked file. I'm going to encourage you, unless you're always working on the same machine, on the same device, and have everything in the same storage place, you probably don't want to use links. So I'm going to say uncheck link there. All right, now we do place. And again, we see the little thumbnail of it. So I'm going to bring this right up to the corner here. And there's our image. Yeah, one thing I forgot to do that you should almost always do whenever you start a new file is to turn on your rulers so you can kind of see what you have the measurements for what you're working with. You can do that under the View menu or under Command R. So rulers, show rulers, Command R. And there's our rulers. All right, next we want to make the layer that we're actually going to put our illustration on. So I'm going to click on New Layer again. And this is layer number 3. If we want to, we can name that, call it Illustration. And we're going to put our illustration like this. Let's put it like right in this area where it's mixing with the sky and the slightly cloudy background. And so what we want to do is kind of define the area that we're going to work with. And then when we're done with that, we can hide these other layers, and we don't need to have them kind of interfering with what we're trying to create for an illustration. So to define this area, I'm just going to click on my rectangle tool. I'm going to make the rectangle black, and it'll make sense why in just a minute. So to do that, I'm going to put, here's the stroke, which is the outline. I don't want any stroke on this, but I do want fill. And for the fill, I'm going to, I can double click on it and a color palette will come up. In this case, it has already come up, and I can just click here on the black. If I want to pick a color, I can go through the color pickers here, or I can use the CMYK percentage values and things. We just need black. That's all we need for right now. So I've got black fill, and I'm just going to draw this kind of just by eye, and I think something like this would be probably pretty good for, move it up and over a little bit. But that's roughly where we want to have our illustration fall within. All right, so now let's click on the layers. Let's hide the Corona del Mar layer. We'll keep the model layer active. And in fact, I'm going to move it up a little bit using my Move tool. So I've selected the layer, move it up a little bit using the Move tool so that I can see both of those. Let's go back to the illustration layer, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I can do that by Command plus, or I can use the zoom tool over here. But I just want to make it a little bit bigger so I can see what I'm doing just a little better. Okay. The size of our rectangle has not changed. It's just the view that we've zoomed in on it. Okay, so we're ready to start our illustration. One of the things I want to do before we start drawing these clouds here, this background that we're going to work with, I want to make sure it's in the back so that we can put things on top of it. So to do that, I'm going to use my selection tool, click on it to activate it. You see a bounding box come up, and I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And you didn't see anything happen there, but what that means is the next object we bring in is going to be on top of it. Even though it's going to be in the same layer, it's going to fit on top of this, this black rectangle. So let's start making some of this shape. And as we can see, there are 4 circles that comprise most of the outline. So let's start with the circles and see if we can kind of get those pretty much to the proportions that we want. So this first one is kind of medium size. The next one is the largest. This one looks like it's the second largest, and then there's a little one over on the far right. So what I'm going to do to make my circle is first I'm going to click on my shape tool. So by default it's a rectangle. If we click on that little arrow that's at the lower right, click and hold, we'll see the other options that come up. And so we want the ellipse tool. Let's also change the color on it. So what I'd like to do, instead of black stroke and no fill, I want white stroke with no fill. So I'm just going to double click on this, and the color picker comes up. I can put in values that equal white, or I can click on color swatches, and there should be a white up here somewhere. There it is. Click on white, and now we've got a white fill with no stroke. To make the ellipse, if I want to make a circle, I can try to draw it, but I may not get it quite circular. That's pretty good, and it's giving me an indication that that is a circle. Or if I hold down the Shift key while I click and drag, that will constrain it to be a circle. Okay, and that looks pretty good for the first proportion probably. Okay, so I'll draw that. Yours doesn't have to be exactly the same. We're kind of doing this by eye. We could be precise and measure it, but what fun is that? And remember, we're going to have some type that will go below the circles, below the clouds, and some type above it. So we don't want to fill all the space with our clouds. So that's probably good enough for the first one. Second one's going to be a little bit bigger, and we'll overlap some. So I'm going to click out here to deactivate it. Click on my ellipse tool again. Hold down the Shift key. We'll start up here, make this one a bit bigger, something like that. They're overlapping. Might be all right there. And then we're going to make our biggest, let's make this a little bigger. So if I don't like it and I want to change it, I could delete it and do again, or I can go to the selection tool and here again, hold down the Shift key, click and drag, and we make it even bigger. Something like that. And move it around if I want it so that it's kind of, so that this part's starting to come down. Just play around with it until you get something that you like how it looks. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, the third one is going to be this one, so it's way over at the side, and it would, without the lightning bolt cut out, it would probably come down about here, and the other one meets here. So let's go to make another ellipse. I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And it didn't really start where I wanted to, but I think that's probably pretty good in terms of the size of it. And if I want to move it, I can use my arrows and move it around, which I usually do if I don't have to move it a long way. Or I can use my my selection tool and click and drag and put it more into the position that I kind of want it. Let's see. I'm too high on that circle, aren't I? And I'm too big. So let's make it smaller. And move it about in there. Something like that doesn't look too bad. And now we got to make the little one on the end. And move it into position a little bit better. Something like that as a rough outline. Okay, so we can say that doesn't really look much like clouds. It looks more like, I don't know, googly eyes that are reproducing. So we've got some work to do still on this. What I want to do next, I think, is I want to see where I want to straighten the bottom of this image. Okay, and it looks like it's about where this one starts, the first circle starts to curve back a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place myself a little guide there. Get out of this tool, deselect everything so I can kind of see what I'm doing. And to put in a guide, it's very simple. If you want a horizontal guide, you come up here to these rulers. If you want a vertical guide, you come over to these rulers. What I want is a horizontal guide. And I'm going to click in here and drag. And then I release it where I want the guide to be. And I think I want it probably right about in there. Okay, and that's not an object or anything. That's just a line that is there so that I kind of know where my kind of where the bottom of these clouds is going to be. Why do I need to know where the bottom of the clouds is going to be? Because I'm going to need to make a straight line here somewhere. And let me zoom in just a little bit too. I can also see there are two areas at the intersections of the circles where the white part of the circle does not go below the line. And that's a potential problem when I go to start to combine these shapes. So what I'm going to do is go back to my ellipse tool and get my color selected again. And I'm just going to draw a little shape in here. And I don't really care how good it is. I just need to cover up that spot. All right, and I just need to cover up this spot as well. Just need to make it big enough. As long as it doesn't go below the lowest parts, I'm just fine. Okay, so, oops, I want to go back minus. Now what I want to do is create a straight line along the edge that I can then use to divide this object up. So what I'm going to do is make a rectangle. So I'll click here, go back to my rectangle tool. I'm going to again select my color as white. Nope. There we go. That's undo is always there for you. So let me deselect what I'm working on here. Okay, rectangle tool. And I want my fill to be white. Swatches white. All right, now I've got a white rectangle, and what I'm going to do is, following this line, I'm going to click and drag and make sure I cover the bottom of all those circles. All right, now I've got a good rectangle. Now, the next thing I want to do is select all of these items, but not this black background that's behind it. And remember I said that everything you make is going to go on top. So I'm going to have a hard time selecting possibly these two little rectangles, unless I can, these two little circles, unless I can see them. So let's see if I can. If not, what I can do is move this one back a couple of layers. So I'm going to go to my selection tool. And we've got this one selected already. Now, holding down the Shift key is how you add to selections. So if I hold down the Shift key, now I go up here and it's saying, oh, you've got a circle here. So I click there and we can see that's selected. And now I go down to that little one that we made and it highlights. You know, once the selection tool has found it, and I'm going to click it. And now this one I'll click. And now there's the other little one that we made. There we go. Click it, this one, and this one. And we know that we've got them all selected because they've all got the green highlight on them. Okay, so now with all of them selected, what we want to do is we want to get rid of all of these parts of the vector objects and leave these parts on top. And to do this, this is a cool tool. It's called the Shape Builder tool. It's right here. So what we're going to do is click on the Shape Builder tool, and the Shape Builder tool has two options. If you just click and drag, it adds to what it's having selected. If you hold down and you see there's a plus sign right there in the corner of the arrow. If you hold down the Option key, that changes to a minus sign. So now if I click and drag with the minus sign selected, it's going to get rid of anything that I drag through. So I'm going to come down to only the areas I want to get rid of. So down here, Option, and now I just start to click and drag. I'm getting rid of the rectangle, getting rid of the bottom of the first circle, getting rid of that little corner of the intersection of that circle, the rest of it, this little bit up here, this bit. You can see there's a real tiny bit right there. I should probably zoom in, but I think I can see it all. There's that bit, this, and this, and this. I'll let loose, and pretty cool, huh? That's the basic shape of the clouds edited. All right, at this point I realize I've not saved my file yet, which is a bit risky. So let's go ahead and save our file. So do File, Save. Put this in these in the folder I've already set up, and I'm going to call this my clouds illustration. Don't forget to save, and we're going to keep the AI Adobe Illustrator file extension on there. And most of the time you don't need to deal with these options. I'm just going to click OK here, and we've got our file saved now. So if something happens and our application crashes, at least we've got the work that we've done so far. Okay, we've got our cloud illustration done. What we have left to do is the lightning bolt. And if this looks a little different than the earlier section, it's because I was doing the earlier bit on my office computer, and now I've switched to my laptop, so that's why you're getting a little bit of a different view. There are several ways we could draw this lightning bolt. You can see it looks like a triangle, two parallelograms, so we could draw those shapes and combine them. We could try to draw it freehand with the pen tool or something like that. In the interest of time, because I want you to be able to do this in one lab period or just a little bit more, I'm going to take the easy way out and just going to show you how to trace from the original drawing there, or from the original photo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select just a red stroke so that we can kind of see against the red and the white background when we're ready to. To do that, I'm going to double click on that, ask for my color swatches, and then I'll just select the CMYK red. Red stroke, no fill, that's kind of what I want. Okay, now we're going to slide over to our original model here. I'm going to take the pen tool and I'm just going to trace around it. Now the way the pen tool works is you don't click and drag with it. You don't really draw freehand with it. What you do is you click to lay down a vector point. You click and release, and then you move it to where you want the next point to be. And then you click and release. And again, you click and release, or if you click and hold, you can start to make curves and things of that nature. Illustrator wants to get back to, the pen tool wants to get back to the place that it started. And as you see, as I hover the pen over the original starting point, a little circle comes up saying it's ready to close the path. And so typically that's what you're going to do if you are going to create a closed path shape. Okay, I'll go ahead and delete that. So let's go back to our pen tool, and this time we're just going to follow the outline of the lightning bolt. So I'm going to start, let's zoom in just a bit so we can see what we're doing better. I'm going to start down here at the point, click and release, come up here, click, and just follow this around, putting down a point on each one of these corners. Up here I'll just have to kind of guesstimate. Something like that looks about right. Follow this around. And this is just a quick and easy way of kind of doing a trace and getting the shape of this the right way. You could do it on your own as a freehand image, but it might take you a little longer. All right, now I want to move this over onto our other cloud. I can try to click it and drag it. Let's select it here. I could also, in this case, I'm going to copy it, which is Command C, or edit copy. And now bring it over here, and let's zoom out. And paste it. And that way I've got an extra copy of it if I need it. All right, let's scale this, make it a little bit bigger. So to do that, I'm just going to, with my selection tool and holding down the Shift key, I'm going to get on one of those corners and make it more the size that I want it to be. Not sure exactly, but we'll go with that, and then I'm going to start moving this into place. Looks pretty good. Maybe that's a little big. I'm going to take it back down a bit. Okay, when you get it positioned where you think is pretty good, we'll go ahead and get ready now to work with the combination of these two shapes together. So similar to the last time, we're going to use the shape builder tool to knock out this part of the clouds in the shape of the lightning bolt. So I've already got this the lightning bolt selected. So with my selection tool, I hold down the Shift key, which allows me to add to my selections, and now I'm going to click on my group of cloud circles. From there, we go to the Shape Builder tool. Click on that, and let's zoom in a bit. So what I want to do is the Option key again, which will subtract, and I'm going to drag it through all of these areas that I want to knock out. So I hold down the Option key, that turns it to a minus, and then I click and drag and pick up each one of those sections. There's a little corner right up here I have to get. And now we've knocked that out. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, that'll work. Now that the illustration is done, the next thing to do is to take our illustration and put it onto the Corona del Mar layer. And the reason is we've got a white background here on this illustration layer, which is going to interfere with things. So what we're going to do is, first I'm going to get rid of this black rectangle. We're done with it. Delete it. Oh my goodness, what happened? We don't see it. Well, our illustration is white on a white background, so it's still there. I'm just going to click and drag, and there we've got our illustration again. And just in case anything happens along the way, I'm going to copy this, edit, copy. Now I'm going to hide this layer, go and make our Corona del Mar layer visible, and do edit, paste in place. And there's our illustration. Okay, let's go ahead and get rid of our guide now. We don't need that anymore. So that's under the View menu. Go to Guide, and then Clear Guides. We're almost done. All that's left to do now is to set the type. So what we're going to do is to kind of recreate this. Only instead of setting that type, you're going to put, instead of Trevor Murphy, you're going to put your name. Instead of no cloud, put COMM 317, and instead of photo feature, you're going to put digital foundations. And we'll try to match this typeface reasonably well. I'm guessing that might be Futura. So let's select our type tool. We're going to go to the character palette here. This window will come up. We're going to change our typeface to Futura, and I'm going to want Futura bold. And let's try 21 points. Okay. Now let's actually change the color. Instead of stroke and white fill, we just want white fill. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to get rid of that stroke. Now we just have white fill. And now we'll click here on our type tool, and it's going to start us with lorem ipsum, and we're going to change that to all caps COMM 317, and somehow I got my color changed back to black. No problem. We select it, change there, get rid of the stroke, and now we've got white type. Now recall over here, these characters are really spread out, so we're going to have to do something about that. We've got a couple of options here, and we're probably going to have to use both of them. We can adjust the tracking, which your reading talks to you about the tracking, but the tracking options we have will only take it so far, and we've got to really exaggerate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an extra space in between each one of these. So like that. good. And we're going to get this centered in here a little bit better, bring it down. Now I'm going to select this type with my type tool, go back into my character palette, and here on the tracking option, that's the changing the width between a whole group of selected characters, whereas kerning just does between two characters. I'm going to set this to, let's keep going here. That's 100. Let's try 200, which is our maximum. Let's see what that looks like. Zoom out a bit. That'll be all right. We'll do that for now. Okay, so let's kind of center that in place, COMM 317. Now we're going to set name and digital foundations and also spread those out. So for the name, we're going to use the same typeface, same color. Change that to white with no. And this time, let's take this size down to, say, 11 points. All right. And again, we're going to do this in all caps. I'll put my name here, and I'm going to put extra spaces in here to start with, and I'm going to go with 2, and we're just going to have to kind of play around with this. Depending on how long your name is, you might need more or less. All right, so I've got it spread out some. Now we're going to apply some tracking to it. And I actually think that point size is maybe a little too big. Let's take that down 1 to 10 and put the tracking on here. It's kind of showing what we're doing. Let's try that. That'll work. Tuck this down into place. All right, one more to do here. That's digital foundations. We'll take our type tool, set it down here. It keeps wanting to go back to a different color, so click on that for white. And select our type. Keep this in all caps. And I'm going to go ahead and put a space in between each letter. I'm not sure if we'll need it or not. Looks like it'll be, oops, one more space there. Right, and that's actually going to work pretty well in terms of the overall space. So I don't think we'll need to adjust the tracking on this. You might on yours, depending on, kind of depending on the size font that you're using and the font that you're using and things like that. So let's have a look at what we've got. So let's have a look at this. To kind of zoom out and fit everything in the window at one time is Command 0. And deselect this. It looks all right. Looks all right for a title page. So we're ready to save this. We don't need this layer anymore, the model layer, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And now we've got everything that fits within there. Oh, we've got this little guy out here we can get rid of. And everything fits. To save this, let's go ahead and save our AI file so that it's up to date. And then now, for what you want to submit to Titanium is a PDF. And so what we're going to do is File, Save As, or Export. We're going to do the Save As. And instead of Format Adobe Illustrator AI, we're going to do Adobe PDF. And what that's going to do is embed the pictures, embed the typefaces and everything, and it's also going to compress it so that it's a fairly small file size. So saving the PDF file, so that's now cloudsillustration.pdf, and that's the one that you'll load up to Titanium.